80s. If you were a child of the 80s, there were a few cartoons I can almost guarantee you watched. G.I. Joe,
pork chop sandwiches,
Transformers, and of course, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And if you were a child of the 80s, you've probably been hearing phrases like, knowing is half the battle, and watching humanoid turtles stab people since you were in diapers. If that sounds anything like your childhood, chances are you grew up playing Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo, or hanging out in arcades playing games designed to take all your milk money. Games you had to be careful not to spend all your money on so you can afford to buy a carton of room temperature milk to drink with your hot pizza after running a mile in PE, for that special kind of vomit-inducing torture you only get from the American public school system. Of course, arcades and early consoles didn't have much in the way of multiplayer outside of the sports and Mortal Kombat style head-to-head games, or the trading off the controller style like Super Mario Bros. But all of that changed with the invention of the beat-em-up, a genre of just walking from left to right punching everything from humans to cars that stands in your way. A genre that became a launchpad for the cooperative multiplayer gameplay style that later became a must-have for first-person shooters and linear story-based games, with even giants like Grand Theft Auto dipping their toes in. A genre that goes all the way back to 1984 with the release of Kung Fu Master, that was quickly followed by every licensed game for the next 10 to 15 years. Everyone had a beat-em-up. The Punisher, The Simpsons, The X-Men, The Shrek, and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with their classic Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Turtles in Time. Developed by pachinko machine maker Konami, the game was originally released only as an arcade cabinet in 1991. The game was quickly ported to the Super Nintendo with extra levels, slightly downgraded graphics and sounds, but with 2 additional modes, time trials, and verses. The game was also ported to the Sega Genesis, majorly downgraded under the name Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Hyperstone Heist. Hyperstone Heist is easily the worst port by far, with the verses and time trial modes from the SNES version cut, along with half the levels from the other versions, knocking the total level count down to 5 from 10. But it did include a longer version of stages and a dedicated run button for all you run button fans out there.
Woo! Yeah! Run button!
But throw that Sega Genesis in the trash because today we're talking about Turtles in Time. And if we jump right into the main game, we start off with the choice to pick from any of the 4 turtles. All the turtles play generally the same, covering slight variations of attacks like normal hits, jump attacks, and throws, with each one having moderately different traits and power attacks. Raph is quicker than any of the other turtles with a short range and has a sweeping roundhouse kick for crowd control. Mikey has the most power with medium range and a flying lunge for a power attack. Donnie's bow staff gives him the most reach along with a lunge attack like Mikey. And Leo is the most well-rounded of all, combining all the strengths of the other turtles, just slightly lesser, and has a sweeping sword attack to take down crowds, much like Raph. Each of the power attacks the turtles have can be really useful to get out of a sticky situation, but much like all good things like cigarettes and gunshots to the face, every use of one of these power attacks will decrease your life, so they should only be used in case of emergencies, but we're getting ahead of ourselves as usual. Once your turtle is selected, the game opens up with Krang stealing the entire Statue of Liberty before a broken speaking spell tells you the title of the level.
Big Apple! Yeah.
And this happens at the beginning of every level, and it can be pretty janky by today's standards. The sound quality is garbage and all blown out sounding, and sometimes the words start in the middle or cut off early, or they're just entirely silent. In normal beat-em-up fashion, you walk from left to right, clearing out waves of enemies consisting of multiple types of foot ninjas, robot trash cans, for real friends Pax My Poopin' Pup, clay football player guy, and a whole slew of classic turtle villains like Bebop and Rocksteady, Krang, and Shredder. And all the art for the characters is based off the original Tmnt cartoon series that ran from 1987 to 1996. That was probably a lot of people's introduction to the Turtles. Starting out with the first level,
Big Apple! Yeah.
is pretty standard, taking place on a New York bridge with a giant Krang head and wrecking balls to avoid. The second level is more of the same, but moved to the city streets. But you do get these little bits where ninjas jump out from the sewers and you can drop into the hole, where the turtles state that it's a creepy cave. Which leads me to believe the Ninja Turtles live in constant fear, seeing as how they live in the same sewer system. The third level is where stuff really starts to change up, with your terrified turtle surfing his way through the very sewers he was afraid of moments ago. This level is pretty easy to cheese your way through by spamming the attack and jump buttons outside of the xenomorph section. Sorry, the pizza monster section. And while we're on the topic of pizza, when it's pizza time, pizza can be collected throughout the levels to grant the player with extra health or special attacks.
Pizza time.
And after you're done being amped from aggroing some sick A-frames and shredding some serious gnar, you'll take a trip to the Mad Max Technodrome to take on Shredder, in what is easily the longest level of the game, spanning 3 complete level-sized sections with 2 boss fights and an elevator sequence. When you finally face off with Shredder, you'll have to throw ninjas at his tank to defeat him. Once his tank is destroyed, he'll jump into a computer and send the turtles back in time, along with a bunch of his own ninjas. You'll find yourself in the prehistoric era for the next stage.
Turtlesaurus.
Come again?
Prehistoric Turtlesaurus.
Oh. This level changes up the look from the New York aesthetic we've seen for the first half of the game, and also adds foot ninjas on dinosaurs that will absolutely flat Stanley you into the dirt. The next time jump will take us to a pirate ship that has wonky floorboards that'll pop up like a Tom and Jerry rake in the front yard to stop you dead in your tracks. As we warp ahead to the next time period, we find the turtles on a train in the Old West, so I can finally see what I've been dreaming of since I was a little boy. John Wayne, but a turtle. John Wood Turtle, if you will. Outside of the moving train being a cool location, there isn't much else added in this level. But there is this pretty cool cowboy. Fool me once, shame on you. From the Old West, we time jump to the far future of 2020, where the turtles fly around on giant Beyblades. And for this being a game that came out in the 90s, they really nailed what 2020 looked like. Well, everyone's wearing masks at least. When we leave our big Beyblade behind to let it rip another day, we take a trip through a future space station to fight Krang, who never returns the Statue of Liberty. I guess that American landmark's just gone now. And we set off back to the Technodrome to fight Shredder once more, just minus the tank. Once you defeat Shredder, he nonchalantly hops over the side of the railing, and the journey is over. When the game is completed, you get rewarded with Master Splinter telling you to play on a harder difficulty, because nothing these teenage science abominations ever do is good enough for him. But if all that wasn't enough for you, you can always play through the whole game again with a friend, which greatly decreases the difficulty without making the game any less fun. Outside of the story, the time trial mode is a pretty fun pick up and play mode, spanning 3 different stages from the main game, broken up into sections where you race against the clock to see how fast you can clear each section with a 30-second time limit for each. And if you cleared the story with a friend and want to beat them senseless for stealing all the pizza time, you can drop into versus mode and fight them head to head in a best 2 out of 3 competition to see who's the most turtliest? Turtles in Time, while basic and pretty short, I completed the game in roughly 40 minutes, is a pretty solid beat 'em up and honestly competes pretty well with Maximum Carnage for my favorite game in the genre. The Turtles have had many games since the release of Turtles in Time, many of which I've never played, and as far as I know, none of them have ever matched the level of greatness that Turtles in Time reaches. But the Turtles were recently featured in Nickelodeon Kart Racers, so they must be good, right? Along with all those other games, Turtles in Time was also remade from the ground up with full 3D models, but the same classic gameplay under the title Turtles in Time Reshelled, released as a part of the Xbox Live Arcade on the Xbox 360, and was later ported to the PlayStation 3. I also haven't played this version, but from what I've seen online, the graphics are pretty solid, matching the look of most modern Turtles games. And I would like to tell you more about Reshelled, but due to a license expiration, the game was delisted from online retailers just 2 years after its release. But hopefully one day I can find a way to cover this lost title in the future. But being stuck with the original version isn't bad by any means. The gameplay still holds up well, and the 16-bit graphic look of the SNES is reminiscent of the cartoon's animation, so there isn't really a bad side to only having access to this version. Sure, the game can be pretty difficult at times, especially the levels with 2 bosses like Bebop and Rocksteady, but that can easily be fixed by bringing in a friend to help. And after you and your friend finish the game, you can introduce them to this channel and get them to subscribe, like you definitely have already done. And while you're at it, you can comment some of the other comic book-based entertainment you've consumed together for me to cover. Go play Turtles in Time.
What do you think?
I like turtles.